Tama was a worthless loser knight who got mercilessly clapped in battle like Tanjiro's family. However, the isekai gods decided to reincarnate him as the world-ending kitty, a plot-heavy elf that drains his nuts every day. It all started in a dark cave where he had just regained consciousness. After checking his stats, he realized that he had been reborn as a world-ending behemoth and thought the world would fear him until he checked his reflection and was shocked to see that he looked like an unearthed kitten. The next morning, a hot elf named Aria got her mega melons warmed up before getting dressed and heading out. Meanwhile, Tama was still staring at his reflection and couldn't believe that he was so puny until a slime showed up, thinking he would be a great snack. Using one of his skills, Tama turned it into pudding and took a quick bite, which gave him the slime's powers before he stored the rest in a pocket dimension. At the time, Aria had just gotten to a dungeon and was making her way in to slay monsters, while Tama was taking down as many as he could to steal their powers. After taking out the dungeon serpent, he kept looking for his next victim and found a treasure chest with a priceless gem inside. Unfortunately, it was a trap that transported him onto the back of an earth dragon that had been eagerly waiting for a fight and tried to smoke him on sight. He used a metal skill to keep himself protected from its attack, but the strike was too strong and left him bleeding out. Before it could finish him off, he managed to attack its eye and flew out through a hole in the cave, but his injuries were still too painful and caused him to pass out. Thankfully, Ariha was passing by at the time and saw him, so she took him back home, where he was surprised to see that such a hottie was taking care of him. Over the days that followed, he quickly got used to sleeping in her melons and stuffing his face with her milk, but that eventually gave him a strong desire to protect her. On her next trip to the dungeon, he snuck onto the boat and closely followed her in to keep her safe from any cultured predators that would try to have fun with her plot cannons. Just then, she saw 3 goblins and activated a high-speed skill to easily tear through them, while Tama watched in shock. The next moment, another goblin appeared, but it was a magic user and summoned a ball of fire to torch Ariha, who didn't have enough time to escape. After pushing her out of the way, Tama attacked the goblin and sent it hurtling down a flight of stairs before getting his feline nuts rubbed on the way home by a very thankful Ariha. Before heading home, they stopped at the guild, where an ugly myth-head adventurer named Kussman was waiting to ask Ariha if she was ready to join his party. He then tried to grab her cakes, but Tama immediately tried to bite his fingers off and almost clawed out his eyes. Pissed off by the fun-sized death machine, Kussman pulled out his sword to chop him in half, but it was held back by a bald, steroid-pumping drag queen named Arnold, who turned out to be the guild's receptionist and chased him off with a warning. Arnold then looked through the goblin ears Ariha brought back and told her to expect a promotion before she went aside to give Tama's nuts another special rubdown. About an hour later, she had drowned herself in booze and was struggling to keep her cultured demons in check, so she went to wax her melons, and Tama deeply fought back the urge to pounce on them. When he started sneaking closer for a taste, she talked about a legendary elf named Alicia that saved her entire village and became the reason she worked so hard to get stronger. The next day, they stopped by the guild to meet Arnold, who immediately tried to make her leave before Kussman showed up with an order from the Baron stating that Tama had to be put down because of his attack the previous day. Ariha desperately begged for him to be spared, so Kussman offered to let her keep Tama as she agreed to a duel, with the terms that his victory would mean he gets to make her his wife. To save Tama, she agreed to it, so they met up that evening with most of the village gathered around to watch. Knowing that he was a rank higher than her, Kussman agreed to let anyone fight beside her, but the villagers were all a bunch of wussies, so Thomas stepped in to fight with her. Once Arnold started the fight, he charged in and Kussman tried to split him in half, but he dodged, and Ariha used the opportunity to activate her acceleration skill. Unfortunately, Kussman wasn't all bark and dodge before leaving a nasty bruise at her side. As Kussman kept attacking and overpowering her, Thomas struggled to decide if using his behemoth powers would end well for the both of them. When Kussman eventually knocked her swords away and charged in for the final slice, he activated his metal skill and shattered the sword before using wind magic to blow him away. Everyone was shocked to see that he could use magic, and he expected to be sent back to the afterlife because of how dangerous behemoths were, but they got excited, thinking he was just a special cat. After a night of celebration, he woke up in Aria's massive milkers the next day and accepted his new reality. Days later, they both decided to spend the morning in bed, snuggling up to each other, but things took a turn when Tama decided to check out her ear. The happy noises she began to make startled him, so he jumped off to escape, but she kept begging for more. Afterwards, she took him to see Vulcan, a hot demi-human blacksmith with biceps of steel, who immediately fell in love with how cute he looked. While he took a nap on her beefed-up melons, she asked Ariha why they stopped by, since her swords were still getting worked on. Ariha then asked if she could make something special for Tama, and Vulcan loved the idea. She immediately measured him up and started working on a sketch to make sure the armor wouldn't be too big for his baby paws. The next day, Ariha brought him back to try it on and couldn't get enough of how good it looked on him. Vulcan then said there was nothing more she could do to make the swords better and suggested forming a temporary party so she could watch Ariha use them up close. Later that day, she was in the dungeon, smashing goblins with her mallet, while Ariha and Tama watched and wished they had gotten a gym membership sooner. The next moment, a mage goblin tried to incinerate her, but the flames only charged up her iron fists, which she then used to blow out his spine. With the goblins cleared out, she told Ariha to focus on taking down a nasty orc who desperately wanted to take her milkers for a spin. Using her acceleration skill, she charged in for the attack, but it easily predicted her moves and tried to counter. Thankfully, Tama was close by and used his iron body skill to shatter its sword, giving Ariha an easy win that she definitely didn't like. Vulcan then told her that the sword's length was probably throwing her off, but Ariha was desperate for a fix, so she suggested fighting another special monster. Ariha got excited again, but immediately changed her mind after seeing the human-sized bacteria blobs known for forcing hotties to make creampies. Determined to get stronger, she charged in with both swords and tried using her acceleration skill to get closer, but their tentacles were too fast and knocked off one of her swords. Not ready to give up, she still charged in and was a lot faster this time, but it caught the sword and smashed it against a rock. Just then, Vulcan tossed her a smaller knife, and their lightweight helped her gain enough speed to defeat the first one. For the second one, she blasted right through and took off its tentacles, but it then sprayed her milkers with special juices. While fighting back against its effects on her mind, she charged in for a second attack and sliced it in half. With both monsters defeated, Tama rushed over to steal its abilities with a bite. He then realized that Ariha was still pissed at the blob for almost making her reach the point of no return. After taking out her anger, she thanked Vulcan for the help and said she was looking forward to testing out the knives on other monsters. Before that though, Vulcan took them to a special spot with a fountain that was mostly avoided by monsters because of the Philosopher's Stone kept there. One look at it gave Ariha flashbacks of a bloody war, but she eventually snapped out of it and removed her armor to take a bath. Tama desperately tried to look her way, but her G-cup milkers were impossible to ignore and she told him to join them. Once inside the bath, she asked Vulcan about her previous party, and the steroid-pumping hottie immediately broke down in tears as she explained how they all left her to smash each other's cheeks. Remembering that, she told Ariha to be careful with Tama, as his kind was known to aggressively clap other species after growing to a certain point. Before Tama could process that information, Ariha grabbed him and said she was looking forward to it because she wanted his furry wand to be the first one in her box.
What do you mean by that?
Moments later, they got to a much deeper level and found a minotaur to test her improved skills. Using her speed, she landed a flurry of slashes, but they were too weak to penetrate its thick hide, so Vulcan attacked with her mallet to distract it. While Ariha kept slashing at incredible speeds, Tama tried to watch but couldn't take his eyes off her milkers until she cut out the minotaur's eyes. It frantically tried to smash everything close to its body and almost crushed Vulcan, but Tama jumped in to save her with his sonic scream. By then, Ariha had finally used an opening to take him down, and Tama got excited to see her win, while Vulcan started to realize why Ariha wanted his furry stick so badly. Afterwards, they stopped by the guild to get an appraisal from Arnold, who couldn't stop gushing about how proud he was of Ariha. Moments later, they got a table to eat, and Vulcan asked if they could make the temporary team up a permanent thing. But Ariha got shy because she had never started a party on her own. Realizing that girl logic would get them nowhere, Tama carried her hand over to make it official, and they drank to celebrate. Later that night, Tama woke up to their melons crushing him and thought it wasn't so bad until they started mumbling about the cultured dreams they were having of his magic stick.
Yeah, boy.
Days later, he and Ariha were looking for a spot to grab lunch in town when they saw two thugs beating up a civilian. When she asked if everything was okay, one of them recognized Tama and told his meathead partner before they both bolted. Aria then checked on the girl they attacked and took her to the church, so she wouldn't be alone anymore. After that, Arnold congratulated her at the guild for getting to rank C, and she thanked them all for the help to improve her skills. Just then, she noticed the other adventurers discussing something and got curious, so Arnold told them about kidnappings being done by demons in the neighboring town. Hearing that the demons had no mercy for whoever they took made Aria pissed, so she asked Arnold for all the information she had about it. Vulcan then asked Aria if she was sure about facing demons with her kitchen knives, but Aria claimed to be ready for any battle to protect the people. Just as Arnold told them to expect help from a group of knights, a Sigma Chad named Cedric showed up to get acquainted. One look at his chiseled jawline took Tama back to a great war between humanity and demons that would have ended badly if not for the intervention of a powerful mage. Among the mage's strongest soldiers was Cedric, who then got close to greet the girls before Aria asked if their numbers would be large enough to defeat the demons. Just then, Arnold told her that he was actually a lot stronger than he looked and lost control over his senses, causing Aria to realize that Cedric was a sausage lover. The next morning, Aria picked Tama up so they could get going, but he realized that she was nervous and tried to cheer her up. To thank him, she pulled him close for a kiss that melted his feline brain cells, but he regained his focus for the mission ahead. Moments later, they were in a carriage with Cedric's party of misfits, and Aria quickly introduced herself to get acquainted, but the girls immediately fell in love with Tama. The next moment, he was on a new pair of milkers, getting cozy while Aria watched and felt a tingling sensation in her box. Right then, Cedric pulled over the carriage as they had run into a group of orcs, so Danny stepped out and sliced right through them in an instant. By nightfall, they got to the village and met with the chief, who then explained how all the adventurers they had sent into the ruins to fight off demons never came back. Hearing that reminded Aria of her tragic backstory again, so she waited until dinner to ask the others what led them to become knights. While they all admitted to doing it because their parents were either slaves or in debt, Cedric, whose father was a duke, said he joined because his decision to take brutal backshots meant he could not take over the family name. Afterwards, the girls all went to the dressing room to prepare for a bath, and Thomas saw melons of various kinds that he didn't even know existed. For some reason, Vulcan got embarrassed by his staring and ran off to enter the bath. After waxing their plot cannons while Tama's brain went into overdrive, they got into the bath, and Aria started complaining about how difficult it was to carry her monstrous milkers. The girls then massaged them and caused her to make happy noises until Danny got tired of listening and snuck out with Howard to see. Just as they were about to get a good look, Tama showed up and blasted them back into their bath. Several minutes later, they got to the ruins and didn't realize that a demon named Astaroth had been waiting to set the perfect trap. They had barely made it inside when a group of werewolves showed up to attack them. Howard immediately used a taunting skill to agitate them, and the others swiftly sliced through their thick fur like butter. Tired of being a spectator, Aria gave Tama the signal, so he equipped a new water skill and blasted right through the rest of the werewolves. Astaroth could already tell that he was more than an elemental cat, so he decided to bust out the big guns. Meanwhile, Aria had taken a break to rub Tama's belly and wished he could blast something else through her dripping hole. When they eventually made it to the deepest part of the ruins, Astaroth revealed himself with a bunch of A-rank trolls to finish them off. Cedric then told them to split up, but Astaroth had been hoping for that and used dark magic to separate Tama from Aria before sending out the trolls. Tama first ripped one off their arms, but it quickly regenerated, so he focused on evading while thinking of a way to defeat them. Cedric, on the other hand, had been itching for an actual challenge and charged up his sword with dark magic before tearing through their midsections and canceling the regeneration. By then, Tama had been backed into a corner and knew he could win by equipping a new form, but that would also mean being feared and separated from Aria, so he used fireballs to burn them faster than they could regenerate. Astaroth then tried to understand Cedric's power, but Aria and Vulcan kept him busy, so he kept dodging their attacks until Vulcan kicked up enough dust to distract him. Aria then stabbed into his heart and released a special power that overpowered him, but he quickly sliced her arm before collapsing. After Aria also fell, Tama tried to figure out what happened, and Astaroth kept saying something about a great power returning until he turned to ash. Seeing how fast the poison was spreading, Cedric claimed it was from a poison dragon, so they quickly rushed her back into town to get treatment. Unfortunately, the local physician said it was too late, as the only thing that could stop it was the eye of an earth dragon. The girls then suggested hunting one down, but Cedric said it would be too late by the time they managed to find one, so the doctor decided to administer some painkillers to make her death painless. Determined to save her, Tama flew off and went back to the dungeon at the city to find the earth dragon that almost clapped him. She was excited to finally finish him off, and he knew his current form would be too weak to defeat her. Accepting that he might never get to be with Aria again, he switched to a much stronger form and attacked. He blasted her with a stronger version of his fireball skill, but she was still much stronger and sunk her fangs into his neck. As his life force slowly drained, he charged up his tail for one last attack and managed to slice right through her skull. As she fell, his mana level drastically reduced and returned him to his regular form, so he quickly activated the pocket dimension to carry her corpse. Moments later, Vulcan was crying beside Aria while the others watched her slowly fade away. But then they heard a loud thud outside. Tama had just dropped the earth dragon's body and struggled to catch his breath before climbing into Aria's bed to watch over her. While all that was happening, she was dreaming about the bloody night when her village got attacked by demons. She managed to reach the woods, but they still caught up to her, so she gave up and soiled herself in fear. Just then, the demons got attacked by a behemoth, and that experience led to her love for cats. Over the days that followed, she slowly recovered and eventually got strong enough to head back to the city where Arnold was waiting to welcome her. Due to the poison's effect, she still had to sleep a lot, so Tama went to the dungeon on one of those nights to figure out why he couldn't change back to his behemoth form. After looking through his stats and finding new skills from the Earth Dragon, he decided to test them out on a Minotaur. Once that was over, he heard footsteps and saw a plot-heavy cavewoman walking toward him while holding a piece of his armor. He got ready for a fight, but when she tried to pounce, he decided to make a run for it instead and luckily escaped through a crack in the wall before heading straight home to sleep in Aria's Mega Melons. The next day, she dressed him up and took him out for a picnic date so she could properly appreciate the risk he took to save her life. She then told him about how Alisha and her behemoth saved her all those years ago and made her village safe again. When she got older, her mom tried to stop her from becoming a warrior, but she had already made up her mind and gave her a hug with a promise to return after getting stronger. With tears hanging on her eyelids, she asked Tama if her dreams were ever going to come true, and all he could do was comfort her until she felt better again. They then went to see Vulcan, who had just finished with the new armor and wanted her to try it out. When they first got back, Aria was heavily rewarded for taking down Astaroth, and she used the money to get a special medal so Vulcan could make her armor and knives a lot lighter. After making sure they were perfectly fitted to her golden globes, they went into the dungeon to test it out, and Tama buffed up their defense magic to make sure she was safe. The next moment, they found a goblin, and Aria quickly sliced through it without even needing to use her acceleration skill. Just then, Tama heard a familiar voice and saw the same psychotic chick from the other night. Aria then asked for her name, but she didn't even know what that was and said she had been waiting for Tama to pump his special milk into her buns. Aria immediately told her to stay back, and Tama jumped into her chest pillows for safety, causing her to see Aria as the only way to get what she wanted. Aria then offered to take her back home, and she gladly accepted, knowing that it would mean being around Tama. On the way back, they started to think of names for her and eventually settled on Stella, which she claimed meant beautiful in her homeland. Once at home, Aria washed her plot cannons, and she couldn't get over how clean the soap made her feel. After she dived into the bath, Aria placed Tama on her drumsticks and gave him an eyeful of milk jugs while cleaning him up. Stella then asked to wash him as well, but Aria said she was the only one who had the right to do that. Later on, they got tucked in for bed, but then Tama started hearing Stella's voice in his mind. The shock only increased when she said she was actually the earth dragon he had clapped in the dungeon. She had spent her entire life dominating the food chain down there and thought no one would ever be able to defeat her until Tama flew in for the rematch and flogged her into the Shadow Realm. At the last moment, she used a reincarnation skill that brought her back with monstrous milk jugs, but she was too interested in finding him and paid no attention to the fact that she looked like an uneducated OnLifeN's model. She then said she wanted to have his babies because he was the strongest man she had ever faced and tried to take his beef stick by force, but Aria staved him and told her to stop acting like a depraved lunatic if she wanted to keep living with them. Despite knowing that she could rip the plotful elf to shreds, she decided to play nice all for the sake of eventually getting Tama's nut. The next day, Aria took her out for breakfast, and having her first taste of actual food made her go insane for a moment, but she regained her senses to have another mental discussion with Tama. Afterwards, Aria took her on a stroll through town to see if that would help with the memories she claimed to have forgotten. All Stella could remember was the shock she got seeing Tama hop into her golden globes, so she said it was the only thing she wanted to figure out, causing Tama to realize that she had been seeing Aria as superior to him in terms of strength. Aria then suggested becoming an adventurer to see if that would help, before taking Stella to get her plot cannons wrapped up in Vulcan's shop. They were both a bit skeptical about her choice to dress like a fatherless Instagram baddie, but she loved how the outfit kept her melons warm and cozy. Aria then asked Vulcan about weapons that might be a good fit for Stella, but she told them not to worry about that and unleashed her half-dragon abilities. While Tama realized that she still had the strength from her past life, the girls kept playing with her parts until she told Vulcan to quit it and tried to find the perfect weapon to match her strength. After she eventually found a shield meant for giants, Tama asked why she didn't go for a sword, and she explained how losing to him made her realize the importance of good defense. She then found a sword to match the shield, so they went down to the dungeon to test it out, and Aria told Tama to keep her safe. Before Vulcan could come up with a plan, Stella bolted and found 3 goblins trying to enjoy a nice meal. They immediately attacked, so Vulcan and Aria told her to stay back with Tama, but she pounced and dropped the weapons before using her dragon claws to rip both of them to shreds. Just as the last one tried to attack, she picked up her sword and sent it to the Shadow Realm, leaving the girls frozen in a state of shock, while Tama saw that she was reincarnated with exactly the same powers as her past life. With no other goblins to fight, Stella got frustrated and said she wanted stronger opponents, so they decided to head deeper into the dungeon and found 2 orcs. As they charged in, Stella smashed the first one against the wall, and the second began to reconsider the attack, but it was already too late. With both of their insides painting the corridor, the girls decided to go even deeper and eventually made it to the part where they faced bacteria blobs. Before Aria could warn her, Stella jumped in to face it, but its tentacles sent shivers down her spine. Tama then showed her what would happen to her milkers if she got caught, so she charged in to attack, but the blob grabbed her sword to keep her back before spraying her with love juices. The next moment, Stella went nuts, so Aria and Vulcan ran in to save her, but Tama could tell that it had something to do with her dragon nature. He then used a tentacle skill to hold the girls back before using a powerful water blast to end the cultured blob's reign of terror. After getting her senses back, Stella felt stupid for being so weak, so Tama comforted her and promised to protect her, causing her snail to get extra slimy. She finally decided to accept help from Vulcan, who then promised to help her become a proper member of the party. That caused her to remember all the other adventurers she obliterated in the past and how strong they were as a team, so she got excited. Just then, Aria lost control over her intrusive thoughts and begged Tama to manhandle her plot cannons with his tentacle skill. Before he could process the insanity unfolding before his eyes, she had already started taking off her armor, but Vulcan thankfully stepped in to get her under control. Moments later, they were back in the dungeon looking for another set of victims and took a break to decide on which role Stella would play for their team attacks. A few minutes later, they saw a bunch of orcs, so she used her shield to taunt them until one charged in. After taking off its arm, she tried to end its miserable existence, but it took off running, so she chased after it. Tama then used the magic buff skill to amplify Aria and Vulcan's magic, but he also increased Aria's craving for his furry sausage. They ended up plowing through every monster they came across before finding the bath and hopping inside to relax. In a matter of seconds, Tama was battling demons as he could see every inch of their melons again, and they made matters worse by putting them right in his face. After he hopped on Aria's milkers to relax, Stella merged her dragon melons with hers to argue over who deserved to get Tama's attention. She had apparently realized that Aria was actually weaker than him and felt that she could do a better job of loving him. But Aria refused, and they both kept arguing about it. Vulcan tried to settle the beef by suggesting that Stella become a junior wife to Tama, but that only made them argue a lot harder until the pressure of their melons shot Tama up to the roof. Later on, they made it back to the guild and introduced Arnold to Stella, but before officially making her an adventurer, Arnold showed them a man named Reese who had a special request for the group. He was planning a long trip and needed a strong party to keep a valuable item safe, so Aria asked what the item was. After saying it was not something they could talk about in public, he took them to a storage building where he had stashed away Stella's dragon corpse. While Reese was explaining how valuable the corpse was to Aria, Tama noticed the shock on Stella's face and kept asking if she was okay. She then told him that seeing it reminded her of the strength he used to finish her off and started craving his magnum even more. Afterward, Arnold gave Ariha a new status pendant before congratulating her on reaching B rank. The next day, they started on their journey, and Vulcan promised to catch up after finishing an important job she had to take care of. Just a few hours later, they had already started slaying beasts and kept going until sundown, when Reese handpicked a bunch of lilies for Ariha and said they were his fiance's favorite flower. Ariha then asked why he needed a dragon's corpse, so he told them about an acquaintance that had been gathering rare and extremely powerful items to prepare for a great war. Hearing that, Tama thought back to what Astaroth said before he became a hideous statue. Moments later, they all got tucked in for the night, but then a fog filled with fireflies suddenly appeared. Tama's whiskers could feel the shift, so he went to take a look before Ariha also went out and got shocked. Reese then said it was likely a labyrinth, which was rumored to spring up in random places in the forest, before getting the wagon ready and riding off until they got to a safe distance. Ariha was a little excited, as she had never seen a labyrinth before, so Reese waited until morning before telling them to go check it out, as he could safely make it to the city without them. After Ariha thanked him for being considerate, he told her to be careful, as labyrinths were notorious for having deadly surprises. As soon as they started heading back inside, Tama buffed their protection magic just in case, and she thanked him for it before trying to stop Stella from running off alone. Knowing that she only really cared about Tama, she offered to let her hold him for once on the condition that she had to act like an actual teammate. Stella immediately hit the reverse button and promised to do anything she wanted, right before they heard a voice and listened as a fairy promised to lead them to treasure. Stella foolishly chased after it, and they ended up in a dead end cornered by C-ranked apes. Like that wasn't enough, Stella almost ran off to fight on her own again, but Thomas psychically shared some of his IQ points so she could remember teamwork. With Ariha being a B-ranked adventurer, they easily cut down the apes in an instant, but after that, they heard another voice in the bushes and got curious. The next moment, two labyrinth fairies named Fairy and Lily came out to introduce themselves. Stella was already considering taking a bite out of Lily when Fairy grabbed Tama to pet him, making her insecurities flare up. After Lily also got in on the action, she got pissed and asked why she had to restrain herself when they were the ones that led them into a trap. Lily then said they only wanted to meet Tama, and Fairy proved it by using her powers to show them where the treasure was. After Ariha checked inside and found a mysterious potion, Stella told the girls how lucky they were to still be in one piece, so they decided to show a little more gratitude by telling them about another treasure chest. To get it though, they had to take a key that was conveniently hanging over a nest of Terminator bees. The next moment, Stella started off by blocking the bees' death stings, and Tama used his howling skill to reduce their numbers so Ariha could easily slice through the rest of them. After getting the key, Ariha asked for the chest, but the girls said the key was actually for a door leading into the boss room, where the chest had been stashed away. Not ready to deal with another battle, Ariha decided to head into town and rest up first, and the girls begged to tag along because they had never seen a regular town before. Once they got inside, Ariha tried to give them instructions, but they ran off to go sightseeing, so she had to scold them like your deadbeat dad does after a night of drinking. Once she finished, they ran off again and basically robbed a local snack seller, so Ariha paid him and decided to let them enjoy their first taste of civilization. Later on, Ariha took the potion to Reese and he said it was the drop of truth, a potion that could make anyone spill their darkest secrets and say whatever was on their mind. Before he could go into detail, the girls showed up and he freaked, claiming he had never seen fairies before telling them to get help from someone else and running off. Later that night, Ariha tried to show Fairy how to wash her plot cannons because she had probably spent all her life licking the dirt off like a cave woman. Just then, she felt something wriggling in her melons before Lily popped out and decided to play a game of tag that caused Fairy to manhandle every inch of Ariha's milkers and dump truck. After Stella joined the fun and traumatized Tama, they finally got room to rest, but then Stella tried to carry Tama since she kept up her end of the deal. After he pushed her away, she started bawling her eyes out, so Ariha sweet-talked him into finally giving her permission to hold him. Seeing the way she acted like a mere touch had activated her inner walls, made Ariha worried for Tama's safety, but she decided to let Stella enjoy it, as it was likely going to be her last time with him. While that was happening, Vulcan had just gotten close to town, but then an undead loser suddenly showed up, so she reduced him to bone powder and saw someone watching. Hours later, the girls got to the door leading into the boss's room, so Fairy and Lily promised to wait behind while they went inside and found a torrent drake. It immediately attacked with head spikes, but Stella blocked it while Aria and Tama tried to attack from the side. It almost turned her into soil nutrients, but Stella thankfully blocked it and used her shield to draw its attention. It then tried to smash her, but she used the dragon fist to hold it in place long enough for Tama to use his flame howling skill. After he used tentacles to hold it back, Aria delivered the final slice, and it dropped before the treasure chest appeared. Inside it, they found scrolls with an ancient skill, and Aria absorbed it before seeing that she had a new sacred sword skill. With the mission complete, they went back outside, but all Tama found was the smashed snack bottle the girls were eating from when they left. Aria immediately ran off to find them, and Stella followed behind her, continuing to call out their names while Tama tried to track their scent. After hours of failing to find any clues, they made it back to a pub in the city where Vulcan had been waiting to see them. She noticed how upset they looked and asked about it, so Aria explained what happened to Lily and Fairy before deciding to keep searching across the city. Just then, a dollar store Alfred walked in and took one good look at Aria's mummy milkers before saying the Earl had specially requested her presence. While Vulcan's chocolate melons also got her invited, all the other ladies suddenly seemed tense, and Stella thought it was her caveman stench. After the depraved butler also noticed the anti-gravity monstrosity on her chest and invited her, she refused to come along, and Aria explained that they had an important matter to attend to. The butler then said that it was against the town's rules to refuse the Earl's requests, so Vulcan immediately apologized on behalf of Aria and promised to join him in the carriage after getting ready. After he left, Stella asked why they had to go with him and stopped looking for Fairy and Lily, so Vulcan said she had heard a bunch of rumors about the Earl. In the carriage moments later, she explained how all the town's baddies had been disappearing since he took over, which meant he could have been the one behind whatever happened to Lily and Fairy. Moments later, they made it to the Earl's castle and were introduced to the scum of the earth Fatso, who then instructed the wannabe Alfred to serve the girls their finest tea. Once he had poured it out, they all took a closer look and picked up a scent worse than the Earl's foot fungus. They then tried to refuse the tea, but he insisted, so Tama buffed their protection magic to keep them safe from whatever they had spiked it with. After swallowing the entire jug, Stella snatched up the overweight creep to ask about Lily and Fairy, but Tama told her to cool off, so she dropped him. He then said the girls had been possessed and would need to be purified by a secret jizz method involving his special juices. In an instant, they had all been surrounded and Stella got ready to fight, but then one of the soldiers told the butler that they had bigger problems to deal with. The entire town had been overrun by undead skeletons, and they were all heading straight for the Earl's castle, so he told the soldiers to abandon the girls and ran off to save his cheese-filled flabs. The girls then ran out to take out the undead army with help from Tama, but after Vulcan saved a girl from getting her insides clawed out, she told them to go find whoever was summoning them while she stayed back to protect the villagers. At the time, even more skeletons had gotten to the Earl's palace, and Stella's overactive eardrums had just helped them track the necromancer's bell to Race's place. When they asked why he was summoning skeletons, he said the Earl had clapped his wife to death with his secret jizz method and charged up his mana to summon even more, revealing that he had been using Lily and Fairy's magic to pull it off. He then activated a powerful summoning art that greatly affected the girls and thanked Aria for putting all the pieces together before releasing Stella's dragon skeleton. After using his newfound powers to take control of it, Stella charged in to take him down and got slapped into the upper atmosphere. Tama then tried to use his howling skill on its spine, but Reese quickly regenerated it, so Aria used her new sacred sword skill and managed to deal some damage, but the skill drained almost all of her energy. Seeing that, Tama checked his stats and realized that he still couldn't use his advanced form, so he told Stella to help him hold off Reese in the meantime. By then, Vulcan had just gotten the girl back to her mom and conjured a wall of flames to keep the skeletons away. As Tama kept trying to distract it, Vulcan almost got stomped into the afterlife, but she pushed back, so Tama used his tentacle skill to pull the girls away from Reese. Vulcan then ditched her boots and used dragon magic to push even harder before jumping and taking off an arm. Leaving Reese feeling like a pathetic failure again. Aria tried to tell him that Eliza would not have supported his revenge, but he refused to give up and tried another summoning. This time, one of the skeletons approached him and held his hand before revealing herself as Eliza and telling him to accept the punishment for his mistakes before returning to the other side with the rest of the skeleton army. The very next day, everyone in town had gathered for Ria's public execution, and Earl Clapsalot quickly got ready for it. But Ariha offered him some tea to ease his stress. After enjoying a cup, he addressed the locals and commended the girls before asking Rias why he was playing substitute Grim Reaper. Rias then accused him of killing Eliza, and he easily admitted to it, so Ariha held up the potion of truth she had slipped into his tea and asked about all the other baddies that had gone missing. After he also admitted to treating them worse than Jeffrey Dahmer, the villagers went nuts and attacked him while Rias was freed and thanked the girls for their help. By nightfall, the Earl and his butler had been tossed in the slammer, and Rias was also made to serve time for his crime. Ariha, on the other hand, took Tama into the bath, where the other girls were already waiting to get a taste of his furry magnum, and they all ended up fighting over him. Comment +size creep if you want to see the next part, and don't forget to subscribe if you like the video and want to see more recaps like this.